BBC Radio Sheffield.
Frederika, thank you very much for joining us, taking time out of your
to be here.
busy life. So it is the time of year, isn't it? My brother was talking to me about what he described as autumnal fatigue, which I quite like that phrase.
Yeah, that's a nice
When
phrase.
it gets colder, it gets darker, you tend to feel a little bit more tired, the clocks have gone back. And we do know that there's a more serious side, the kind of seasonal affective disorder. But do we all get a little bit of this kind of autumnal fatigue, as my brother put it?
In a very unscientific way, I'll say yes. I think we all do. And even with the work that I do, you know, I find myself getting a bit flat at this time of year. And actually, I was thinking about this yesterday because I have been feeling a little bit, there was stuff that I was putting off because I've got a big project on, and I was kind of thinking, but it's scary. And then I thought, right, come on, follow your own advice. So I went swimming yesterday, and you know, even something as simple as that, actually just that little bit of time out, just doing a few laps, and I came back and I was really productive for the rest of the day, and I felt much better. So there are things that we can all do that actually, you know, can be very simple, but that help us.
Do we sometimes just need to leave ourselves to go down? It is quite natural. I mean, you know, there's a bit of hibernation going on inside us, surely, where at this time of year, you just want to stay in. You might want to eat a little bit too much and be a bit stagnant, probably not great for you. But shouldn't we just allow ourselves to hit, you know, to just, you know, I don't know what the phrase is, kind of just coast it out for a bit?
I think there is value in that. I think, you know, we need to accept that we can't be happy and on top of the world all of the time, and that actually looking after your well-being is just being in tune with your emotions and how you're feeling. And I think there's nothing wrong with hibernating a little bit in winter. However, we need to be aware enough of our own emotions and how we're feeling to see when it's becoming more than that. Because then there I'm indoors, then actually that can very rapidly go into quite a downward spiral where it gets worse. So
well, let's talk about those moments. Let's talk about that point at which a little bit of hibernation, eating chocolate, reading and watching telly gets to the point where, you know, maybe we need a little bit of intervention. How would we know then?
I think it's different for every person, and part of that is really to become more familiar with tuning into how you feel, and it's something that's really trial and error to a great extent. You know, we all know as we become older as well and more aware of how we feel, of when it's starting to tip. It's like, you know, with stress, it's the same thing. You know, a little bit of stress can be really good and fuel us to take action and do stuff, but we all know really when we get to a point, we might be masking it, but we all know when we get to a point where it's actually just tipped over into too much and we're feeling overwhelmed. And it's the same with feeling a little bit flat. You know, we all have days when we don't feel great. I hate the rain. I hate grey weather. I hate the rain. I hate grey weather. I don't mind cold weather. I can be, you know, as long as it's sunny and blue sky, but we don't get an awful lot of that in autumn and winter. So it's about knowing when it's just that and when it's a little bit more, and having those sources for help. And one of the great ways to do that actually is to take a little bit of time out, perhaps to do a bit of mindfulness or meditation where we can tune into how we're feeling as well.
So mindfulness and meditation, should we have in our sadness pocket, I don't know what kind of pocket you could call it, you know, a few things that we know usually make us feel better. So going for a coffee with a friend, having a swim, going for a walk. We know the things that can lift our spirits. And, you know, I remember when I got quite ill, when I was physically ill, I got quite down, and it was because I'd run out of things. The things that used to work couldn't work, and that's when I realised that I probably needed a bit more help.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what I always used to call the little happiness ingredients. You know, you need to know what they are for you. And actually a great time to do an exercise to help you with that is when you're feeling on top of the world, then you can make a list of all the things from like the really big stuff, you know, like going on holiday that costs money and takes time, to really, really little things like taking 5 deep breaths, you know, and making a list of the things and knowing that you've got those, so that when you're feeling down, when you can't actually think of things that are going to make you feel better, you can go back to that list that you made when you felt great and look at those, and that can really help.
Frederika Roberts is with us. We're talking about how we can keep ourselves in a good spirit, I suppose, is the best thought, rather than happy.
Yes.
I have issues with that. We'll talk about that after we've had, we'll have some Simply Red. Simply Red and Stars on BBC Radio Sheffield. I'm talking to Frederika Roberts. We know her as the happiness coach. I always say, whenever you come in, Frederika, I think I say this every time you come in, that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the word happiness and to be banging on about being happy, because sometimes it is an unattainable goal. It can be at various periods in your life. And also, I just think contentment. Is that a better word?
I like the word contentment, and I also like the word well-being. I think, this kind of concept of happyology and everything being all happy-clappy is a bit, it can actually have very negative connotations for people who don't feel like that. And I think also, there's been some great academic stuff written about the tyranny of positivity, And
leave me alone to be sad, man.
Absolutely. And it's really not about being a Pollyanna in life and thinking that everything is rosy. That's not what I'm about anyway. It's just about doing everything you can to be as well as you can be, and that's physically as well as mentally. It's why do we just go to the doctors when there's something wrong with us physically, but not think about, well, what can we do to look after ourselves mentally?
It's about maintaining well-being, which is something that we don't focus on. We talk about mental health, but we don't really talk about, we talk about mental illness, but not mental health, which
and it's
all
just
of
about
us,
being well, most of the time, and doing what we can. And being mentally well can mean that you go through periods, of being really sad or really upset or really angry, but having the tools at your disposal to pick yourself back up and being resilient.
And accepting the range of emotions, that's part of it
absolutely.
as well, isn't
Emotional literacy is something I do a lot of work on in schools, because, we need to teach children from an early age how to understand and accept their range of emotions and how to express them. We see a lot of challenging behaviour that is actually just emotions that they don't know how to express. So there's a lot of that as well. And if we don't learn that in childhood, we see a lot of challenging behaviour in adults that perhaps haven't actually learned how to understand and express their emotions in different ways as well.
Let's talk about you, Frederika. You walked in here today and I thought, is that Frederika? You look wonderful.
Thank you.
I mean, you've always looked wonderful, but you're looking really different. What's been going on for you then?
Well, in the last year, so in November last year, so almost 12 months exactly, I had weight loss surgery. I had something called a gastric sleeve, which is our stomach. So my stomach, after the surgery, was probably about the thickness of my finger.
Was that with the intention of losing weight?
It was with the intention of losing weight.
So as a happiness coach, why weren't you happy with the size you were, Frederika?
Well, I was a very happy person, and you interviewed me plenty of times when I was the weight that I was. But I was very aware that being in my late 40s, I was starting to really suffer with certain things like sciatica. I was becoming less mobile than I'd like to be. It hadn't got to the point where it's completely life-limiting, but I was just feeling that moving around was getting to be quite an effort, and I was in quite a lot of pain a lot of the time. I didn't realise actually until it went away just how much pain I was in on a daily basis.
Were you happy then in that pain? Because pain can have a massive effect on all of us.
It does have a massive effect, and I think...
Can you be happy with pain?
Well, you can be, and I was a very happy person still, but it was an extra layer of something that I had to kind of overcome and be resilient against, and I was more worried, I think, about, hoping to live another 50 years or so at least, and thinking about grandchildren in the future and being able to kind of get on the floor and play with them and all of that kind of stuff, which I could see was not potentially going to happen if I didn't do something. And I think, as with everything in life, you have to sometimes realise that if you've tried something on your own and it hasn't worked...
Did you try slimming clubs and all of that then?
I'd been trying since I was 12. So I had spent my entire life almost, battling this seemingly losing battle against weight, when I kept losing weight and then putting more on than I'd lost in the first place, and it was just this spiral. And I thought, okay, what do I tell people to do when you've tried everything yourself? You ask for help, regardless what the circumstances are, whether it's business, whether it's your physical health, whether it's your mental health. And so I asked for help, and I went to see a surgeon, and I feel amazing. And I mean, it's, I never get tired of being told that I look wonderful. It's great. Thank you.
Everyone likes that. This is another thing about happiness and contentment. Giving a compliment makes you feel good and makes the other people feel good as well.
And that compliment doesn't have to be about physical attributes either. So
anything.
Complimenting people on their strengths that you see them display is a really great thing to do. You've displayed great kindness, or you show a great sense of aesthetics in the way that you dress, or you're a really artistic person. I love how you express yourself with colour. All of these things are really great ways to pay compliments. But that said, I love it when people tell me I look great. But what's actually been the biggest difference is how physically I feel great. complete. I have more energy. I can do more stuff. I don't have to think about it for 10 minutes before going up the stairs to get something. I just do it, and that makes a huge difference. So whilst I wasn't unhappy before, of course, being physically well also is a great contributor.
Drastic thing to have surgery, though, Frederika. It
is, and it was a scary thing to do. But it's one of the best things I've ever done in my life, and I feel great for it.
Good, you look great. So you were saying that you've got more energy. You're doing lots of things. We're going to talk about those in just a moment. A book, working in schools, a podcast.
Yes.
Talking to Frederika Roberts. We're talking about contentment, happiness, however you want to describe it. If you've got a question for Frederika, you can do that on 0800 111 49 49 or ask it on text 81333. Start your message with Sheffield. I'm not sure I like this song, Frederika. Let me know what you think. This is Grace.
You don't own me.
Grace, and You Don't Own Me. BBC Radio Sheffield. I've got Frederika Roberts with me. We are talking about all sorts of things, including happiness, including being able to express our range of emotions. That's quite a key thing that we've talked about today. What about this then, Frederika? The Department of Education published a report about happiness in schools, which found that 81% of 10 to 12-year-olds reported being happy with their school. Is that your experience? I mean, I'm quite impressed with that.
Well, it's a lovely figure, and it's interesting you said being happy with their school, which is very different than being happy or feeling well. I'm also a little bit curious to see why they're only quoting 10 to 12-year-olds. I'd be interested to see what the data for other ages was.
Maybe they pick the best bit, which
exactly.
would be worrying, wouldn't it?
You can do all sorts of things with stats. I work with schools up and down the country, and it's encouraging to see, hopefully, that, children are perhaps not as unhappy as we think they are. But I have worked with 10-year-olds that have told me they have panic attacks on a daily basis. I have worked with, 8-year-olds that say because their parents have split up, they just don't know how to be happy. I work with teachers who express the same thing about the children that they work with, and actually also express the fact that children that they teach pick up on the stress levels of their teachers.
Right, which is worrying.
And that's that figure and go, great, we don't have any work to do in schools and there's nothing to be done. I think we can take that as an encouraging sign that there's obviously some good stuff happening, and there is definitely great stuff happening in our schools. But we need to also be able to look at, how can we equip children to make sure that, perhaps they're happy beyond the age of 12. And how can we teach them to build their resilience muscle, and how can we teach them to work to their strengths and all of these things so that they can be happy in the long term.
We haven't got much time now, but you've got a book and a podcast out. Could you tell us a little bit about the book? So
the book is coming out in June. It's called For Flourishing's Sake, and it's aimed particularly at school leaders, but teachers as well. It's looking at whole school positive education. So how can we help children flourish academically and emotionally? And it's looking at all the different elements, from training of teachers to identifying people who have issues that need more support,
Shouldn't it be the other way around? How we can help them to flourish emotionally and then academically? Because
it's
surely
both.
The emotions, then academically. Because
it's
surely
both.
the emotions, the bedrock, the foundation, isn't it?
It is absolutely. Without well-being, you can't really do particularly well, but I think the two go hand in hand. Unfortunately, schools are measured on their academic success. I firmly believe, and the research supports this, that if you work on the well-being first, the academic support follows. So the book is about flourishing in all of those areas, and it's about the children and about the teachers flourishing and the school community. And the podcast, which has the same name, For Flourishing's Sake, is actually out already. I launched it at the start of term in September, and that's absolutely free for anybody to listen to. It's aimed at teachers. It's 5 minutes at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning, but of course the episodes stay for people to listen to whenever. And it's called For Flourishing's Sake. You can find it at forflourishingsake.com, and it's a bit of inspiration and practical tools. It's not just me. I have lots of guest speakers on as well to share tips with teachers.
Frederika Roberts, you've been a joy. Thank you very much for joining us on
Thank you for
BBC
having
Radio.
me.